So much news to talk about. So much news to talk about. We want to talk about, of course, the government shutdown and the elections, but we begin where we always begin, and that is with Israel. Donald Trump said that an international stabilization force should land soon in the enclave. Israel has made it known that it does not want Turkish troops in the region, but we want to keep an eye on what that stabilization force looks like and how it will operate in the region. And we also want to be mindful of the ongoing humanitarian crisis. It's still happening. Babies are still malnourished. Babies are still starving. Innocent people are still suffering. So even though we have a lot going on the domestic scene, even though we're grappling with the absurdity of our politics at this moment, we want to keep track of the suffering in our midst. So, so just keep your eye on that news. We also want to talk about, just shifting really quickly to the government shutdown, the longest government shutdown in history, over 50 days. The House of Representatives have not been in session. Mike Johnson is perhaps the worst Speaker of the House this country has ever had. He's feckless. Perhaps Donald Trump is the Speaker, as he jokes occasionally about being. But we see that the impact of the government shutdown is now being felt, not only in terms of the debates around SNAP, that people are facing hunger in the country because Republicans want to pass a continuing resolution that will devastate health care for millions of folk in order to pay for tax cuts for billionaires. We know this. We know that's the motivation. And we know that they're breaking the law. We know that judges have ordered the Trump administration to pay fully SNAP benefits. We know that there's a contingency fund. At least we think there's a contingency fund. Who knows what Russell Voigt has done with that money? But we understand that we're in this moment where folk who work hard, folk who are have been laid off because of the federal government shutdown and Doge and the like, that our social obligation to the most vulnerable, all of that is in full view as we watch and witness the callousness of the Republican Party. Now, there are some Democrats in the Senate who are they call them a bipartisan group, trying to work out a deal to reopen the government. And I just want to be clear. We want the government to open, but we also don't want Democrats to cave, right? We don't want Democrats to cave and sign off on a continuing resolution that will devastate rural hospitals, that will devastate millions of folk in terms of their ongoing health care. We don't want them to sign off on a promise. These people cannot be trusted. They cannot be trusted. Their word is worthless. So I urge Democrats in the Senate, those who are rightly concerned about their constituencies, about their staff members, but you have to hold the line, because the long-term implications of what the Republicans are trying to do, right, will be even more devastating. And we cannot let them leverage starving the American people. We cannot let them leverage starving the American people so that they can continue to give money to billionaires. I mean, we just had a report the other day that, the shareholders of Tesla are willing to make Elon Musk the first trillionaire in world history. It's sick. It's sick. So we want to urge the Democrats in the Senate to hold the line. Now, we understand that the government shutdown will have an impact on our lives. I'm clear about that. As I said last time, we have Democrats that need to not only hold the line, but they also need to deploy resources in locales and states in order to address the hunger crisis that will only intensify over the coming days. But we have not come this far to surrender. And we know the government shutdown is having an impact on air travel. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to get back home from Charleston. right? Because, that local flight. We know 40 airports, 40 of the central airports will begin to reduce flights, moving to 10%, around 10%, I think. Particularly regional flights will be impacted. Those folk who are flying into small hubs and the like, or small airports, they will be impacted. And all of this has something to do with the fact, or it has to do with the fact, that air traffic controllers are already overworked, stressed out, and now they're not getting paid. Why? Why aren't the air traffic controllers getting paid? Why aren't the TSA agents getting paid? Because Republicans want to cut health care to pay for the tax cuts for billionaires. They are exacting all of this harm for one reason, and one reason only: to fill the pockets of billionaires and corporations. We need to be clear about that, y'all. We need to be clear about that. Now, the government shutdown is what it is. But we just had a recent election. We had elections across the country, and Democrats had a huge, huge night. The success around Democratic candidates from Mississippi to New York can't be denied. From Mississippi to New York can't be denied. Prop 50 in California, right? Overwhelming victory, organized in a relatively short period of time. Zohran Mamdani elected mayor in New York City. Mikey Sherrill, Governor-elect Bamberger, all of these folk across commissioners in Georgia, right? Now, I think something seismic is happening. Now, on Nicole Wallace's show, one of my favorites, Nicole asked me this question about what did I think was going to happen. And I was hesitant to predict. Mark Elias was very clear: Democrats will sweep. I didn't know. I don't know. But now I was pleasantly surprised, and I'm excited about the energy. I'm excited about the energy. Now, of course, there's energy on the other side. Of course, there's energy on the other side. But I think we have to understand the data that's coming into us. We have to understand those exit polls. And we have to resist some things. So I've been trying to find language. I still haven't found it yet, but this is what I'm thinking. One is a seismic shift. Mark Elias said something on Deadline White House yesterday, I believe, on Thursday. He said that the people are waiting for the Democratic Party to catch up to them. That there's already this energy to fight for democracy in real terms. And you can try to shorthand it with questions of affordability. You can talk about it in terms of kitchen table issues and the economy and the like. But I think everyday ordinary Americans understand that there is an all-out assault on basic rights, on basic fundamental value, the basic fundamental values of American democracy. So in light of that claim that the people are waiting for the Democrats to catch up with them, I want us to be careful not to read what we experienced the other night as just simply, or let me say it differently. I don't want us to kind of pigeonhole it into the traditional kind of accounts of politics between presidential election cycles, that the incumbent party always loses in these moments. Of course, there's some alignment, right, with that historical trend. But something else is going on here. I don't think this is about just simply choosing the Democratic Party. I think this is a substantive judgment, right, of the danger, the existential threat that the Republican Party presents. I really do. I think people are reaching beyond the traditional political labels. We only have available to us Republican, Democrat, and Independent. But I think people have always been more complicated than those labels. Our politics, our positions, our commitments, our values seek beyond each of those labels, right? And you could try to capture it with language of big tent or the like, but human beings are more complicated than just simply, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, or I'm an Independent. Our positions can range across any of those particular labels. But when I look at the exit poll data and I see the turnout, And I look at the campaign that Mikey Sherrill ran in New Jersey, and I look at those numbers of black voters turning out. That wasn't just simply about Mikey Sherrill, and they can't read it in that way. You can't read the choice for Zoran Mamdani simply in terms of, of a rejection of the Republican Party and an embrace of the Democrat. Something is going on. The label of democratic socialist gets in the way, but there is this desire for a fundamental shift in not only how we conceive of politics in this country, but how we do it. If it was just simply about rejecting Trumpism, they would have made the more moderate choice of Andrew Cuomo. But, you talk about affordability. You talk about how expensive, in some ways, unlivable New York is. New Jersey is just as expensive, from property taxes to electrical bills and the like. Um, yes, people are concerned about their kitchen table issues. Yes, people are concerned about their health care. Yes, people are concerned about the government shutdown. Yes, they're concerned about masked agents of ICE snatching people out of their communities. We all watched ICE agents enter a daycare. Enter a daycare?
I heard the teacher yelling, "I have papers in English." I saw people carrying their children. I know their children inside because there's a group of parents who dropped their babies off early. And it was devastating to hear her crying. I'm still really caught up about it. The name of the school means Little Ray of Sunshine in English, and our babies are little rays of sunshine.
So Americans are clear that the overreach of the Trump administration, right, is front and center. But that doesn't mean, right, that they are suddenly gung-ho about no, they're trying to save democracy itself. They're trying to save democracy itself. If it was just about the Democratic Party, they would have made, I think, the choice of Andrew Cuomo, the accused sexual predator, right? But instead, people are looking for policies that aren't reducible to political ideology, but are actually policies that address the conditions of their living, that can help ensure that their children can lead a better life than they are leading, that can make healthcare affordable, that can make education affordable, that will allow young folk to buy homes before they're 40 or 50 years old. And let me be clear about the affordability language. So there's an emphasis on affordability, and that's absolutely right. But affordability is also a way of justifying, or let me say it differently, of providing evidence that they were right in the reasons why Kamala Harris lost. Remember that moment on my good friend Stephanie Rule's show when she was trying to say that the price of eggs were too high and that's why people voted for Donald Trump? And I said, I don't believe you. I don't believe that. Right? That race and gender played a role. Right? It wasn't just simply economics. Here, in this moment, right? Those realities still obtain, just as affordability still matters. Right? But we need to understand the depth of the ugliness that defines our moment, right? That undergirds Trumpism and MAGAism, right? And the response isn't just simply to move that ugliness out of view and only talk about affordability. That cannot be the price of the ticket, you guys. That cannot be the price of the ticket. We got to deal with the ugliness at the root. And that what's at the root is not just simply the question of economics. It's not just simply self-interest. There's some other things motivating the reality that defines our lives right now. We have to be honest about that. Even as we're talking about the implications of the tariffs, even as we're talking about the extrajudicial killings in the Caribbean Sea, even as we're talking about the calls to bomb Nigeria in defense of Christians, even as we're talking about shifting refugee laws and only accepting 7,500, most of whom are white South Africans, right? So that you can appease Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and all of those folks. We got to get to the root of it all. Right? An economic system predicated upon selfishness and exploitation that presupposes disposable people, many of whom are black and brown, right, rooted in an idea that some people ought to be valued more than others. The divided soul of America is in full view. The divided soul of America is in full view. So affordability matters. Of course it does. But we also have to tap the root, as James Baldwin would say. And, I worry about Mamdani in New York. I heard the ADL say that they have Jewish New Yorkers back as if, by definition, he presents a threat to them. I heard talk about people, the fire commissioner resigning, folk, the Islamophobia, right, that is just running rampant, the deep racism from folk who walk the halls of the House of Representatives. The response, people are drawing on the language of the Red Scare and McCarthyism to motivate people's fears. Right? I mean, at least be more imaginative. And why? Because someone has given voice to a set of policies tethered to a particular set of values, that people should have decent access to decent food, to good, healthy food, that these food deserts shouldn't exist in the financial capital of the world, that there should be free transportation, right? That could address the most vulnerable and working people so that they can get to their jobs, right? The idea that there's a social contract that obtains between you and me, the government and us, that contract expresses, basic values and responsibilities that we hold, that we have towards each other. And that, right, amounts to or constitutes for some of these folk an all-out assault on freedom. And they are comfortable with what Donald Trump is doing. They're talking about this is communism, this is socialism. They don't even know what that means. Talking about Representative Donalds down in Florida, don't even know what that means, y'all. But they're okay with the federal government owning portions of businesses. They're okay with Donald Trump's crypto grift. They're okay with the expansion of ICE, where it's the largest law enforcement agency in the federal government, and they are trampling upon the rights of American citizens, the rights upon people who live here, the rights that our Constitution accord folk, whether they're citizens or not. But this is okay. But the moment you start talking about giving people access to decent food and giving them access to health care, to making sure that folk can not only dream dreams, but make that dream a reality, that is the assault on freedom. This is a long-standing problem. I know I'm being animated, but this is a long-standing problem, right? Where you have to hold off fascism on the one hand and hold off communism on the other. That goes all the way back to the post-World War II consensus. The vital center, as Arthur Schlesinger Jr. called it. It's going to get you in trouble. So I say all of that to say this, that the results the other night, the results of the other night cannot be read by the Democratic Party as a full-blown endorsement of them. No. Your approval ratings still are what they are. They still are what they are, right? And if the Senate caves, if they don't hold the line, just wait and see. Just wait and see. We cannot read the other night in the traditional terms. The party in power loses seats. The party out of power gains seats. We cannot pigeonhole our current politics into the narrow frame of traditional electoral politics in the country. Something radical is happening. It's radical in terms of the effort on the part of Trump and the administration to undo the basic foundation of American democracy. And the response contains within it a radical refusal. A radical refusal. And you cannot shoehorn that into traditional Republican Democratic politics. I say that, and I'll end with this. I say that with this in mind. When I look at the numbers in New Jersey, and I see the massive turnout of Black voters, and I juxtapose that to the campaign, the Cheryl campaign, and what they did in urban spaces, those numbers don't match that activity, to my mind. Those numbers reflect something deeper. They reflect something deeper. The numbers across the country reflect, I think. Um, of course, it reflects the organization and the organizing and mobilizing. Of course, that's tied to parties, to the Democratic Party, and its activists. But it's also reflective of a practical decision on the part of everyday ordinary folk. That politicians will not be the source of our salvation. That politicians will not save this democracy. We will. We will. And even though I said I don't want to say that I don't trust the American people. I said I'm worried about us. I still am. I still am. But my faith, even with that worry, remains with us. We are the leaders we've been looking for. And if we're going to get on the other side of this madness, if we're going to make it to the other side of this madness, we're going to have to do it together. And what we saw in Virginia, what we saw in New Jersey, what we saw in New York, what we saw in Georgia, what we saw in Mississippi, what we saw in California is just the beginning. It's just the beginning.